Okay, cheers. Yeah, Archer will join us, and we can all slow clap him as he comes in. He did know what time it was supposed to start, even though he claims ignorance. So, I'm Mike James from the Retro Gaming Roundup podcast, and we're doing a panel on the company Commodore and some of the spin-offs from Commodore, general Commodore chat, basically. So, I'll introduce you to the guests, and then we'll get into some questions, hopefully some Q&A from yourselves towards the end. And if I direct a question at anyone, because there's been quite a few people on the panel, if I'm asking you one, you're only going to get a couple of questions. So if you've got something to say, if I ask a question to somebody else, feel free to join in, and we all want to hear what you've got to say anyway. So I am going to start with you though, David. Let me try and get the title right. UK MD of Commodore, was it?
Ultimately, yes.
Okay, so this is of course David Pleasance, and
hello everybody. Hi.
For those who stayed in the room, you know who the next person is. Simon Butler, pixel artist for Ocean, Denton's, and Imagine, places like that. And then of course we've got Colin Forch, again, worked with Simon for many years at Ocean. And of course we've got Anthony Ball over there at the end. So, first question does go to you then, David. UK MD of Commodore, how does one land that gig?
Well, the truth is I tried to avoid it for a while. It's true. No, I mean, I had a very long career. I was one of the longest serving people in Commodore. I had about 12 and a half years, I think, in total. And let's be honest, you get less jail sentence than that for murder. But anyway, no, when I joined Commodore as a salesman, simple and straightforward, and I worked my way up. I did some sort of fairly innovative things at the time, particularly in marketing terms. Ended up becoming a sales and marketing director at Commodore. And at that moment in time, my boss, Steve Franklin, was a young guy, very successful because of all the work that we did for him. And I thought, I'm never going to get above him because he's doing a good job. And then I had the opportunity to take over the role as MD of Commodore International Limited, which is based in Switzerland. And well, the reason for that, of course, was that where they were in Switzerland, you paid zero tax. Surprise, surprise. But my responsibility was looking after all of the countries in the world where Commodore did not have an operating subsidiary. I started off with 35 countries. And I mean, that was a marvelous gig, because I'm, in sales terms, I'm a hunter, I'm not a farmer. So for me to be given 35 countries and let loose, see what you can do, it was really good. I did 2 years of that, and I've been nagging Reddy Alley for a long time, why don't you let me loose in the States? Because the States was, as everybody knows, was a miserable performer for a lot of different reasons. So anyway, one day, I think you'll love this story, one day I was in Germany at a GM's meeting, and we'd had our meeting. It was about, if I remember, it was about 12 o'clock, and got up to leave, and he said, sit your ass down. He said, I've decided to give you your wish. What wish is that, Reddy? He said, I want you to go over to the States. I want you to take over the position of Vice President of Consumer Products. And he said, I want you on the 7 o'clock flight out of London today. Absolutely true, I swear to God. This was early January. Anyway, what he had forgotten, and this is why I think the good part of the story, is that the 7 o'clock flight out of London was Concorde. And he made me go up to the office and book it. So, absolutely true. So I got to fly Concorde. That's the only good thing he ever did for me. But anyway, I had to go over to the States, and we were exhibiting at Winter CES in Las Vegas, which we were usually at. And then I was in the States for a year, and then I came back and was then forced into the MDship in the UK. So that's how it all came about. So the thing is that it was a very varied career within Commodore, and I think that, I suppose, for some reason, people seem to like that. And I've got so many stories, which is all in my book coming out soon.
We're sharing the microphone. I was going to ask you about the book. So you kick-started this just over a year ago,
yeah.
And you more than doubled your target, went really well.
Yeah.
Are you having to leave things out of the book? Have you got some real zingers in there? How was finding the material for the book?
Finding the material was okay. The only thing is that, remember, this is 30 years ago. I'm not a young man anymore. And every now and again I remember, I forgot, I've got to put that in. I forgot all about it. But no, the reason why the book has been so delayed, and it is actually about a year and 10 days, I think, since I launched the Kickstarter, and I had planned for it to be released in time for last Christmas. But the problem is that one of the first people I asked to give a chapter to the book was R.J. Michael. I mean, he's the god. But he's a lovely man. I love him to bits. We're very close friends. But he is most definitely right on that fine line between genius and insanity. And just to prove the point, I kept chasing him. Where's your chapter? It'll be ready soon. Be ready soon. So exactly 7 days ago, he sent me the chapter. So more or less a year to the day. And then since then he sent 2 revisions. It's really bizarre. So anyhow, the bottom line is that we are now in the process, now that we've got his chapter, and I've told him you can't have any more revisions, because we've been waiting for that chapter, and we're now laying the book out chapter by chapter, various other things. That will then determine how many pages we have, what is the size of the book, and the people that are doing the design for the cover, we can give them the dimensions and all that kind of thing. So my best guess is it's going to be out in July, because it has to get sent away and printed. But in answer to your question, yeah, I mean, I think you'll find, what I did was, while I was waiting, and I decided to wait for his chapter, because I thought it was worthwhile, I decided that I wanted to get other people, mostly from within Commodore, to also give their chapters about Commodore from the inside. So I've got interesting chapters from Dave Haney, of course, Beth Richard. I don't know if anybody knows, she was an engineer that she designed the CD 1200, which never came to fruition, but she put a chapter in there. Gail Wellington, who was a software lady, American lady, but mostly worked in the UK. And there's loads of different chapters. There's also chapters from people that have nothing to do with Commodore itself, but for example, I've got a fantastic chapter, all the information and details about the 65, and this is by an Italian guy who befriended me, and so I've included that in the book. So it's a very varied, different topics and different perspectives. I think people are going to enjoy it. I hope so. Anyway, I can't do any more.
Time will tell us on that one.
Yeah.
So I want to bring you 3 into it now, and you're more tangentially associated with Commodore, I would guess.
Can I say something about
You can.
Okay, when I first started programming, and we're talking about the early 1980s, effectively I had a choice of 2 machines that I could buy. One would be the Atari, and the other one was the Commodore 64. And I learned very little about either of them. And I spoke to some friends, and they said, you want to go for the Commodore. Commodore will tell you everything there is to know about the machine if you ask them. And there's a lovely book, the reference guide, that will tell you things. And if it's not in there, you can ring them up and they will tell you. And on the other hand, Atari seemed to think that the only people who should program for the Atari were Atari. They didn't want to encourage individuals like me trying to start off in the business to program that thing. And Commodore had its program problems. I mean, the original disk drives would only work if you switched the screen off, do you remember? You had to turn the screen off to actually load anything from the drive, and then switch it back on again. But they were so incredibly helpful. I think they were in Slough at that time. Slough.
Yeah.
I made an awful lot of telephone calls to Slough in the early days, and they could not have been more helpful. So of the 2 companies, even then, and I know which one I would have chosen, and they were a lovely machine to work with.
It's interesting, Colin, you mentioned the Atari. I know Anthony worked on the Atari quite a bit, and Archer started on the Atari, and all seemed to go the Commodore way eventually.
I would say the exact opposite.
Okay.
Chris Crawford did a really good book for the Atari, and that had all the hardware stuff in there. There was also the hardware manuals before Commodore. They did the full listing for the OS before Commodore. So I'd say the exact opposite. And I like the Amiga, which I think personally is the spiritual successor to the Atari 800 and not really a Commodore machine. I know it's everyone Commodore here. But Commodore was good to pick it up. you know, if there wasn't Commodore, there wouldn't be an Amiga. So, but I think that's the spiritual successor to the Atari 800. So if you follow it back, you know, that's the way I think it runs.
Okay, we've got someone trying to sneak in unnoticed, but ladies and gentlemen, the late Archer Maclean.
Do you agree? Do you agree?
Yeah. So I'm a developer, I'm like. I like the story.
I keep thinking someone's put their hand up. There's a hat stand behind Jim Bagley. I think Jim's trying to ask me a question. Keeps catching the corner of my eye. So we can move on to you four guys again, and you were at places like Ocean, Teatex, things like that. How much of their success do you think they owe to Commodore? I mean, there are obviously other big systems around all competing, but how much do you think they owe their success to Commodore?
Well, Commodore was one of the successful machines at the time, and it was a lovely machine to work with. It had some tremendous capabilities, and I think it went a long way towards their success, but so did the Spectrum, of course. The Dragon, not so much, but I think a few for the BBC in the early days. But
Can I jump in?
you come in, Simon.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I mean, you and I both worked at Imagine, because like, you know, I don't know about the other guys here, but like, I mean, I've had people say to me, "Oh, how long have you been in the industry, Simon?" I said, "Oh, 35 years." And they go, "Oh, I've been in 37. I think, "You lying bastard."
As we go that one.
Yeah, you know, there was no industry 37 years ago. I mean, I started, you know, like, sort of the week Imagine would sort of open the doors, but yeah, they had like BBCs and Dragons and stuff. I think the Dragon was the first machine I laid hands on. But then it did become Spectrum and 64. And I'm not sure whether Commodore were pivotal in Ocean's success, because basically, you know, Ocean could sell snow to the Eskimos. I mean, they really could. Paul Finnegan, one of the nicest guys you'll ever hope to meet, who really should not have succeeded as a salesman, because they've got to be bastards. They just have. I'm not saying, but they are. They've got to have a slice of the devil in them somewhere. But Paul Finnegan, I mean, he was an absolute dream. But like I say, Ocean at one point they couldn't put a foot wrong. They were selling. Well, put this bluntly, they were selling my shit. And the vast majority of the stuff that I did, especially on the 64, I mean, some of them were just absolutely fucking woeful. I mean, they really were. I'm not ashamed.
What you really mean?
I'm not ashamed. Well, no, I mean, fortunately, I can put my hand up and say, well, I never actually did design the games. I just did the graphics as I was told. So I had the likes of the insidious little weasel in Weatherburn saying, "Simon, do this," so I did this, you know, and then the press would tear us apart. But you know, if Ocean could sell my crap, they could sell anything. So I wouldn't actually say the Commodore helped Ocean in any way. But yeah, they kind of went hand in glove.
I know a lot of my wasted youth to Archer's games, particularly the Commodore stuff, and we were saying earlier, some of you started on the Atari computers and moved to Commodore, but I know you did Drop Zone, which I played a heck of a lot, and then of course Jimmy White's Whirlwind Snooker. So how did you view Commodore as the way to go? Because your passion really was the Atari, wasn't it? And
Yeah, well, Simon was saying, was it 37 years is a load of shit? Well, I started in 77, which is 41 years ago.
there you go, Simon.
Was there actually a game? There wasn't actually
Yeah,
a
yeah.
game.
Wasn't an industry.
It wasn't an industry.
You were 4 years old
You were doing it in your bedroom or whatever.
Hang on a sec. What happened was, in 76, 77, I was building computers.
Oh, well, there you go.
I used to build ZE-based things and NASCOM ones, any remember those?
Yeah.
I built dozens of them. But then, I was selling these things, I had an audience of 10, and they didn't have anything to run. So I wrote a game called Death Race, which was a racing game in 1977. I sold it on tape.
I stand correct.
The first
There's
game was Drop Zone in 1984 on the Atari, which was, the machine at the time. Partly because games like Star Raiders were out there and they were just gobsmack you. You looked at those and you thought, well, how's the 6502 and 6502 doing all that? And of course, there's secret hardware which Atari didn't publicise. It's just so
Only
weird.
through the hardware managers and do Atari. That was out.
Yeah, yeah, I
79.
read that eventually, but you had to pay to get a copy from
Oh,
someone
yeah,
like Chris Crawford or something.
Yeah.
And why they didn't sort of give these things away for free to programmers, so, I don't know.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that, Drop Zone would not have happened. And all that landscape scrolling around wasn't done by 652.
One of the good things is Atari, they had the GTIA instead of the CTIA, so actually had 3 more modes, which had like way more colour than 16 colours on the screen at once and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is supposed to be about Amiga stuff, but the Amiga was a 16-bit Atari. If you look at the address and all the chips, they're all the same. The registers are called the same thing. It's just 16 bits.
I know.
So
It
it's designed by
is.
the same bloke, strangely. What was it about? Drop Zone.
Well, not in particular, just how you made the decision to go the way of the Commodore rather than the Atari and make games like Jimmy White.
Sales. I mean, I sold Drop Zone to US Gold and was under huge pressure to do Commodore 64 version, which I looked at and I thought, bloody hell, how am I going to do that? It didn't have any of the fancy hardware features, so I had to seriously strip back all sorts of stuff and still make it move, if I could, 50 frames a second, but that was tricky. But it looked about the same.
It's a beautiful looking game anyway, and it has the kind of the feel of an arcade game, and I know Ocean, yeah, if you like, yeah. But I know Ocean. I've asked these guys this question many times before, so I'll try and change it a little bit. We always try and talk about the movie tie-ins, but let's go to the arcade ports that people like yourselves were doing. How was working on those? Did you enjoy working on those for the Commodore range?
I don't think I'd done any. I'd actually done licensed stuff before I ended up working at Ocean. I'd done the appalling but incredibly successful Transformers, which we were discussing earlier, which is Denton Design's most successful game ever. Forget all the Frankie Goes to Hollywood and all that kind of weirdness. So when I went to Ocean, I mean, you really didn't have any choice. I was just a jobbing pixel pusher. So my very first job was with the very talented Mr. Paul Hughes, who's just...
Hopefully not here. Unfortunately not here this week.
No.
He
Well,
was gonna be here, but
he's taking very, very well-earned retirement after many years of working for the Lego Boys of Traveller's Tales. But I worked with Paul, just did a screenshot for something, a 64 football game kickoff or something like that. Then we did the appalling second version of the horrendous Mag Max. Oh yeah, so that was an arcade machine. And then that was it for a while until I was thrown onto, or I was sent down to London to look at Platoon. We had Arcade Alley, so it was like the room outside, but we had a much smaller version. We just had this one room full of arcade machines, and David and John would go around the world and like try and find the best arcade machines, and you'd get a lump job, they'd say, these guys would say, oh yeah, you can have slap fights as long as you have Mickey Delaney's donkey, and so they'd get some other bag of shite attached to it. And back in the day, there were no videos or anything to look at, so we'd have to sort of play these damn things time and time again, and hopefully Steve Lavash could tinker around inside and put infinite lives and whatnot on, so we could get to the end of these games. I mean, we weren't even recording. We'd have some kind of, if we were lucky, we'd have some kind of camera over your shoulder recording it, so you could look at it, and then you did your damnedest to try and replicate what you saw on screen on the 8-bit machines. And once I reached Ocean, I worked on tons of product, but it was, as an artist, it was mostly Commodore stuff, but later on I was sort of designer, producer, artist, and on all formats on projects. But the arcade machines, they weren't kick-ass in the time. I mean, they did get some really, really good machines. They weren't get, Street Fighter hadn't come along at that point, but they were getting some really nice shooters and whatnot. And then one of my appalling titles, Athena, I actually went back and looked at a playthrough on YouTube recently, and that was throwing around sprites all over the place. I mean, Rastan Saga was, I remember, none of us could get to the end of it. We had to hope hope that one of the little monkeys in the games testing department would be able to do it. You know, and you'd hear the screams like, "I'm on the next level," and we'd all run in and have a look. But yeah, and then we had to try and emulate that on a 64 with that, you know, the Lego block-shaped pixels. And then, thankfully, who was it? Who were the Liverpool boys that did Odin? They did hardware sprites on the top, so high-res sprites on the top. Oh, and it was lovely. And I thought, where have all the horrible fuzzy edges gone? You know, so Heartland for me opened a whole new world of Commodore 64 graphics that I tried to do a couple of times. And yeah, in combat school I succeeded, and in Athena it failed horrendously and exploded in your face.
One of the projects I worked on while I was at Ocean was a conversion from the arcade machine Operation Wolf. I'm sure some of you would have seen it. Now, we had an arcade machine in the office. I was rubbish at playing it, but we had a very talented gopher called Lee Cowley. Remember Lee? And I lost count of the number of times I would go to Lee and say, "Come on, Lee, get me up to level 4 so I can look at it again," because I couldn't get there, no chance. But one of the most challenging games ever to put onto the C64. And I got questions forever afterwards about how I managed to interrupt the Commodore horizontal scroll 3/4 of the way across the screen. It was a trick, but a trick that confused a lot of people. But yeah, we used to love those arcade machines, didn't we? we were no good at them, and it always confused me as to how good people could get at them. So how on earth did you do that? Yeah, Lee Cowley had the way, he knew how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it was good for Ocean. The arcade conversions were very, very popular. The only thing was that it was arcade conversions. If you worked in-house, it was arcade conversions on movie tie-ins. And to a certain extent, it was financially rewarding, but creatively very stunting. You just felt frustrated. You weren't allowed to go to the powers that be and say, "I've got an idea for a game," because you just knew it was going to go nowhere. You know, they were only going to say, "Well, if you don't want to work on arcade conversions, there's the door." So that was Ocean. You did the arcade conversions, or you left. It was as simple as that. And for a while, they were the king of conversions.
I first started on the 8-bit Atari, and then I moved over to the NES for Zippo Rare, and I did the conversion of Cabal for Nintendo, and that was done basically playing the machine. It was quite a hard game. Arcade games are designed to be hard because it's supposed to take money. We didn't have any cheat modes, so we just had to keep playing it and playing it and playing it and playing it. But I love arcade games, so if a game, I don't like easy games. I just like hard games, and so I made the Nintendo version as hard as the arcade game. So basically, if you got past level 2 or whatever, you were good.
You're doing well.
And as a result, I don't have any sold, but now it's kind of a cult game on the internet. People play it and see if they can actually get to the end. And then I got snatched to move to Zippo to TTX. So I did some copy protection stuff for TTX, and I did. They said, "Which game do you want to do?" So Mercs arrived, so I did Mercs, Amiga first, ST conversion, say 2 weeks after the Amiga one. Took about 3 to 6 months, I think, for the Amiga one. Not too sure.
Was the ST one the one with the wrong discs?
Yeah.
The wrong version?
Yeah, I was away and they took the wrong master disc, so they took they took one which wasn't copy protected. Really? The scroll had been changed. Chris Brunning's the person to speak about that. I think he's at Amazon now. Anyway, what we used to do was I wrote a map editor for the Amiga, and it was a black and white. It had a black and white scanner. I bought a black and white scanner, and I hooked it up to the red, then the green, and the blue lines off the arcade. So we'd freeze the processor, so the clock. So basically, we paused. We'd scan the red, the green, the blue. The Amiga then would merge them together, pick the most common colours, and so we'd basically get the maps off the original arcade machine that way. and basically that's what we did. And David Bland, a great graphic artist, he went and used the map editor to cut down the blocks to what would fit. Then the map editor outputted the Spectrum graphics and everything else. So I like Amigas better than the ST. So that's what I used. The rest of the people at TTX used STs to develop on, but I had my own setup where I had an Amiga going across the Amiga, and then I just ported it to the Atari. But everything we had to everything that, in say, using 7 shades of the colour rather than 16 shades of the colour. So it was we couldn't use 4,000 colours that the Amiga had, because everything had to look the same on the Atari because of the spec. And then I went off Arcade Conversion, did some original stuff for Signosis, and I got arrested.
Yeah, we'll come to that, don't worry.
There you go.
Yeah, I could tell a story about Drop Zone in arcade games, because I get almost all the time, is Drop Zone Defender, or Stargate. And how can I put this? Inspiration isn't infringement. But I started off by learning how to write games on the Atari by being an absolute fan of anything that Williams did, and Eugene Jarvis generally, a Robotron and all the rest of it. And I used to go home in 1979 and actually figure out as best as I could how to make the screen move as fast as the arcade machines would. But obviously there was some special sauce in the Williams arcade machines. Anyway, what happened was, Drop Zone started off as Moonfender. And it wasn't quite scrolling, it was actually looking into the screen with Star Wars vector game type turrets on the side shooting aliens coming towards you using plain style graphics. Anyway, one day I ended up with a broken Atari, and I went to Atari HQ in Chessington, I think it was, and they fixed my hard drive and my floppy drive, and then tried some discs. On one of the discs was a copy of this game, and I'd started experimenting with sideways scrolling, and it looked remarkably like Defender and Stargate. And Atari UK said, well, we're in negotiation with someone, I wouldn't say who, for Defender to be put onto the Atari 800 cartridge. Now, if anyone here remembers Defender, the official Atari release, it's really awful. And it runs at about 12 frames per second, it's pure software, it doesn't use anything in the hardware at all, it's, in my mind, unplayable. So they looked at what became Drop Zone, and there was discussions about it, but it turns out that some deal was done on a golf course somewhere in America, and they took the Apple conversion of Defender and used that instead of Drop Zone, and Drop Zone code. And then I ended up with a contract at Atari for a year, doing something really bizarre for ITV's World of Sport, which is another story. I then left and converted what was Moonfender stroke this bunch of code that might have been Defender into Drop Zone, and reversed all the rules and increased the graphics on the ground and everything else, and it became Drop Zone. There you go.
There we go.
I actually have the source code to the regional Defender, if you want to
No, I haven't got a copy of Defender code.
if you want it.
Tony's comment about the wrong disc or the wrong program or the wrong version or whatever struck a chord with me about something that happened at Ocean that I think Simon will remember, but I don't think I've ever repeated this story to anybody else. Jim Bagley might also remember. But this, in those days, the discs that we used were the big floppies, the 5 1/4 things, you know, the things I mean. And they had produced the master copy of a game, and I can't tell you which game it was, on one of these discs, which they then found they couldn't read. And that was the only copy that they had. And the reason that they couldn't read it was because the circle, the centre of the disc had become damaged, and it wouldn't fit onto the spindle properly. And they tried everything there. How on earth are we going to read it? If we can't produce this, it's going to cost us thousands to get back to where we were. And we had 2 electronics guys there, David Collier and Steve Lavash, who were very good at electronics, but I don't know, maybe you know what's coming, Archer, but what they eventually decided to do was to jam a piece of plastic, otherwise known as a condom, between the disc and the frame. Do you remember?
Yep.
And it worked. And then they copied it quickly onto another disc, and then they wrote on this disc in big red letters, thank God for Durex, and then they framed it. It's all true, I promise you.
That must have been the start of, copying, duplication.
Which is convenient because I want to go on to that now. Anthony mentioned it earlier.
Oh,
go on.
Just a quick one. Going back to Drop Zone for a sec, the original copy protection on Drop Zone for the Atari involved, how can I put this, an error code that was unique to a certain hardware malfunction. And what it involved was, if you put a floppy disk in a 5.25 drive and it turns off, the disk always spins to a certain point, usually the directory area, and stops. So if you then take that disk out and rotate it 180 degrees with your fingers, and then get a hole punch and go right in the middle somewhere, no one ever sees that unless they physically rotate it, but the hardware returns an error saying, oh, physical failure. But the code is still on there, and that's what we actually did. Someone sat there going clunk, clunk. That's US gold for you.
So I did want to touch on copy protection and piracy. I know Colin worked on a loader that wouldn't work on a tape-to-tape machine of the era. I want to get, sorry to interrupt, I want to get a bit from everybody, including David of course, on piracy on the Commodore ranges. I mean, was it an issue? Was it something you were very conscious about and thought about, and how did it affect Commodore, if at all?
Maybe ask him first.
Anyone?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I'm very proud of one fact about my tenure at Commodore, in that we were the first hardware company ever to actually join FAST. We paid every year to be a member of FAST, the Federation Against Software Theft, as a means of telling all of the developers, no matter what company they were, that we were anti-piracy. And I think one of the things that we tried to do by introducing all of our bundles and putting games into was getting people on the opportunity to play games from companies they'd never even heard of. Because, as you well know, in the early 80s and mid-80s and early 90s, all of the new companies were mushrooming up every single day, new different companies with different products. So by putting our products into bundles, we actually got introduced the hardware owners into new paradigms, new different companies with different types of products. And I think that worked very, very well. But that's a personal opinion.
I never actually owned a home computer for many, many years, so piracy really was not part of my sort of mindset at the time. I mean, my first sort of run-in with piracy was when I encountered that waste of atoms Bruce Everest, who claimed that schoolyard piracy had caused the demise of Imagine, which it obviously hadn't. It was, the profligate use of the company checkbook and buying each other sports cars and planning a helicopter pad on the roof.
Imagined it.
Yeah, just imagine. Yeah, so like I say, I mean, my revulsion of Bruce knows no bounds, or my sort of love of him knows no beginnings. So, the piracy side of things, I know became a big thing. It was a big thing in Ocean. That we had an incident one time. It was the Ocean loader suddenly became available. We were made aware that the Ocean loader was available outside of Ocean.
Yeah, somebody.
And somebody had ripped it off. And fingers were being pointed left, right, and centre, and everyone was on tenterhooks. Not me, but I was just caught in the middle of it. And then we kind of found out who it was. I think somebody with sort of initials BB, I think it was. Yeah, so and I ended up beating the living crap out of him in some pub doorway for another completely unrelated topic, but because he thought I got him sacked over this incident, and I really didn't care one way or the other. It was no skin off my nose. I was still getting paid by Ocean, so I didn't give a toss. But yeah, that was my only encounter with piracy. I mean, obviously I knew all the guys in there, and that they'd all have the cassettes, and they were all sharing stuff. But security was pretty tight in Ocean. I mean, it really was.
It had to be.
Yeah, well, regardless of the fact that it was. Everyone was flying by the seat of their pants. David and John didn't really know what they were crazy. Nobody did in those days. I've always said that all these companies, all the successful companies, they weren't successful because they were planned to be successful. It was all lightning in a bottle. It was all very much a product of that time. And the thing is, none of us saw it as a career. None of us really wanted to rip Ocean off. We were all getting paid decent salaries. Even the games monkeys in the testing department. You know, they were getting paid more than their schoolyard chums. Yeah, everyone got a Christmas bonus. We all went to, you know, the Christmas parties, and there was enough dirty women to go around for everyone. So nobody ever felt obliged to like piss in a company pie. You know, nobody felt the need to steal from Ocean. They might be stealing from other companies by copying Gremlin games and stuff like that, but they never did it to Ocean. And not that I knew, but then again, maybe I missed something, but I was pretty tight with everybody from like the top down. And it was very much a team, so we played like a team, and we enjoyed what we did. Like I say, we never thought it was a career. We never thought some of us would be here 35 years later, but we also never thought of screwing up, the company pooch. So piracy in Ocean was kind of a one-off thing, wasn't it?
I worked for software projects for a while after Imagine went bust, and they were very keen on anti-privacy and piracy. And this is when I first worked on a tape loader, and we're talking about the Commodore 64 tape loading system. And we were given the brief of, producing a loader that people couldn't copy on a tape-to-tape machine. Now, it doesn't sound easy, but in fact we managed to do it. We managed to produce a copy on a tape that we could load, and if we copied that one tape onto another tape, that wouldn't work. The big problem was that the mass producers who run off these things at high speed, they wouldn't work either. No. So we couldn't use it. But software projects were very keen. They tried all sorts of things. They had these colour charts.
They did one for
with
the
Jet Set Willy and Manic Miner, whatever, that had a big colour chart, and it would pick an area of memory at random and tell you got to enter these 4 colours in. And the colours were picked very carefully so that you couldn't photocopy them in those days. So if you didn't have the chart, you couldn't run the program. That was the idea. Not sure how successful it was, but they took it very seriously. I think by the time we went to Ocean, I think they largely thought that the problem had been licked. Yeah.
Well, a lot of the software houses that I know of at the time all had pirate copies of Deep Paint. They all had pirate copies of Deathpack. They all had pirate copies of whatever assembler was the latest one. They had pirate copies of all the other companies' games, so they could have a look at them. I actually did copy protection for US Gold for a while, so that was a bit before I was on 8-bits, wasn't it? But the 2 main companies they used to use was Trace in New Birmingham at Ironbridge, and there was Spool at Chester. So if anyone was going to get out early, it was for one of them 2 places. If it was a master, if it was after master. So there was ID runs and stuff. There was different versions sent down to them. And the other thing, what we did was, they used to use equipment called Trace, which was nothing to do with tracing anything. It was the manufacturer called Trace, and you'd write a program for the disk duplicator. So they never actually had you take the original down, the master. They take the data off there. They weren't actually like taping to tape. It must be a lot. They actually had a program which knew what the data was. It was checksummed. So there was no problem reproducing any formats. That was all something that probably the managers thought. But they could make any format. You could say, for example, on an Amiga, you could probably fit around 950k on a disk. So you could reduce the size of the bits on the disk, so it wasn't physically possible to copy it on a normal Amiga drive. I think things came out later on like Cyclone, which would copy that type of protection, but without using a normal drive, you couldn't do it. But my mind is, if I know loads of people used to pirate games, and they used to collect them. They never used to really play them. If they played them, they played them for 10 minutes. and it was all about the collection for them. I've got the most games. So then people were never going to buy a game in the first place. Even if it was 5 pence, they would not buy it. So piracy, I don't think has affected the industry really that much at all. If someone wants to buy a game, they'll buy the game. If someone's a pirate, they'll never buy any game. So you wouldn't have never sold anything to them. So it doesn't really make that much difference, in my opinion. Even though I actually made protection, I don't think it made a slightest bit of difference.
That's kind of borne out by the Napster thing. When Napster was really big before it legalised, CD sales went up because people could hear a song they liked, they'd buy
Exactly,
CD from the back.
exactly. I don't think piracy is probably the other way. It made household names of people nowadays. So
We had one schoolboy in Liverpool who made a fortune and figured out how to copy these games and selling them to his mates. So.
Well, I mean, in Ocean, like you said, all the studios had dodgy copies of D-Paint and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So after a while, I ended up like D-Paint and stuff like that. But I mean,
And unreleased versions of D-Paint.
oh yeah, but I mean, in Ocean, like the only piece of software I think that was slightly hooky was for a while. Because when I went in, I remember Dave Collier saying, well, Simon, because all our coders used to, they'd write an editor for you, an art editor, they'd write a map editor and a sprite editor, and eventually one came together, and it was called Short Ed, after the late and very much lamented Alan Short. But Dave Collier said, Simon, well, what would you like? And I said, well, I used to use the koala pad. I said, but the thing about the koala pad is, I said, after a while, you put the stylus on, and you're down in the left corner, and the cursor's up in the right corner, bouncing around until it goes somewhere else. So he kind of tweaked it, and he made a joystick controllable, and it was brilliant. And so you'd see all the artists, and they all looked as though they were playing games, but they weren't. They were doing their art. So that's the only sort of piracy, or maybe they just took something and changed it. But like I say, within Ocean, it wasn't that they were down on it. It wasn't a case of nobody bring stuff in, because people did, and they were dodgy. Paul was bringing in dodgy copies of all the latest movies, but game piracy per se within Ocean, it just wasn't a thing. No, I mean, I don't owe them anything, so I'm not defending them out of some kind of sort of loyalty or anything, but no.
How about the rivalry between the main systems of the era? Did you care? Did it affect the Spectrum, the Commodore, the Amstrad, that kind of thing, and then later the Amiga? And
I hated the 64.
Are you on the right panel?
I like the Amiga. That's why I'm here. The Amiga's great, but I didn't like the 64 at all. Atari 8-bit. Great machine, because it had more hardware to learn. I think it was more just, you could do more tricks, overscan and stuff like that, which was on the 64.
I don't remember any rivalry at all in that respect. I think occasionally somebody would look at a whiz screen you were working on and you'd say, how did you do that? And then they'd go and do the same thing on whatever machine it was they were working on. I can't remember any. Spectrum doesn't care for Commodore or vice versa. We're one happy family, sorry.
Yeah, but without wanting to sort of get ageist, I think the rivalry existed in the schoolyards. Mm-hmm. The rivalry that they talk about was very much a schoolboy thing. And it was like, my dad's bigger than your dad, my computer's better than your computer. As a developer, I have no preference. They both brought different things to the table. They both brought, all three of the 8-bit machines brought their own challenges and their own positive sides, positive and negative from all of them. The one downside for me was the soft fuzzy edges on it, and like I say, the house brick size, breeze block size pixels for the 64. But again, like I said earlier, once I was allowed to do high-res overlays, so that was it. I was away. But I mean, I don't know even really why I'm on this panel, because if you want an Ocean, it should have been Steve Thompson. Well, no, it should have been Steve Thompson, because that guy made the Commodore 64 sing and dance graphically. I mean, he really did. And there are still people out there today, but there were guys whose talents lent themselves more to one machine than the other. I enjoyed working on Spectrum. I was never given an opportunity to really push it. I suppose Never Ending Story is like one of my favourites. But Mark Jones Sr. In Ocean, everyone would just say, yeah, he's an Amstrad genius. But Steve Jolly Thompson is an absolute star. I mean, you know, you look at his stuff from The Untouchables and RoboCop, you look at the stuff that he's doing now, his Golem portraits, his two self-portraits, one from the day and one now. You know, the guy's a master, he really, really is. And so every machine brought its own problems. But the 64 and the Spectrum, yes, the rivalry existed, but it was just a pissing competition in the schoolyards. And it wasn't really justified. And people went with the system that suited them best. That whatever floated your boat, fine. And they all had great games, every last one of them. So while I was aware of the rivalry, it never touched us inside in Ocean. As developers, you knew of it, but it was just outside noise.
Archie, were you affected any preference on any machine you'd rather work on? Or?
Well, obviously, Atari 800 was just special. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. But when it got to Amiga and ST days, I was under huge pressure commercially to make sure that they were identical on both platforms. So what I tended to do was make everything work on the ST, which was limited.
So you're dumbing down the Amiga version?
To some extent, yeah. But even in something like Snooker, I didn't use any hardware. I know that sounds a bit weird, but and just to emphasise the point, when I did IK Plus on the 64 8-bit, I converted it onto the ST in 4 days and then spent about another year polishing it up. But when that went onto the Amiga, it was ST code, and I wrote it specifically so it would compile and run on either version straight away without any hardware stuff at all. So yeah.
David, are we going to hear a different story from you about the rivalry? Were there meetings about what we're going to do about that Sinclair and things like that?
Actually, not at all. We were never preoccupied. In fact, one of my biggest complaints about Commodore is that as a company, from the day I joined them to their death, they never ever had a business plan. So if you haven't got a business plan, you haven't got any rivals. It's pretty obvious, right? But what I'll say is that in terms of the 8-bit market, let the actual numbers do the talking. When Colin Proudfoot and I tried to buy Commodore, we had access as part of our due diligence to all the figures. And there's been lots and lots and lots of figures bandied around about how many 64s were sold worldwide. Well, I can tell you the accurate figure is 26.7 million. That's an accurate figure. You can trust me, I have no reason to tell you a figure. A fib of any kind. So I just say let the sales do the talking, really.
That's worldwide.
Yeah, worldwide, global market. Yeah.
Well, back to the conversions. When I did the Amiga version, I added bits for the Amiga, but I was always in the back of my mind, will this work on an ST? Will this work on an ST? Because the ST was the bigger seller, even though the Amiga was better. The Amiga the ST just sold more. So, like on the Amiga version, I had an overlay panel, but on the ST it was a side panel. But most of the rest of it was the same. I used the Butler on the Amiga and just used every trick in the book on the ST to try and get it up to the speed. I think it ran about a frame less than the Amiga version.
I think you'll find people sold more software on Amiga than they did on ST.
Pardon?
I think you'll find people sold more software overall on the Amiga than they did on the
Not
ST.
at US Gold, they didn't.
Yeah.
Maybe other places, but not at US Gold.
I've got one little anecdote I've forgotten about. When I was working at Atari UK, so this is 82, 83, if you went to the men's loos, they used to have an Apple sticker on the arrivals.
Do we want to know this, Archie?
With all mobile phone cameras and all that.
We certainly had rivalry with the ST and the Amiga 500.
Amiga was a bad machine.
The thing is this, of course, is that Atari had quite a big head start on us because we launched the Amiga 1000.
I don't know anything about after 91, because that's when I left.
No, this is before then. This is way before then. Because, of course, we launched the Amiga 1000, which was a betwixt and between product. It wasn't really good enough in the state it was in its first incarnation to be a productivity machine, and it was too expensive to be a games machine.
Well, Marble Madness, that's the best version of Marble Madness ever.
Yeah, oh yeah. But
On that machine.
what I'm leading to is that when Jack Jamil thought he'd bought the Amiga company and hadn't, he went out and bought Atari for $1 to pay for all their debts, and of course he didn't pay any debts. Smart man. But the point is that he immediately commissioned to get the ST built, and so they launched the ST at an affordable price. And the one thing they were very smart on is that they had a MIDI port in it. And so that immediately attracted anybody who was into music whatsoever got onto that. Now I went to Medi sometime later and said, we needed a MIDI port, and he said, it costs 78 cents, and I'm not spending 78 cents on every machine when only 1 in 10 will use it. That was the logic that you have to face, But I particularly took on the ST, there's a reason for that. That when I joined Commodore, my boss was a guy called Paul Welsh, and prior to, the actual previous MD to when I joined was Bob Gleddard, who was Jack Jamil's right-hand man. And anyway, eventually Paul got left. He resigned, or whatever you want to say. And he did a few other things, and then when Jamil bought Atari, Gleddard joined Jamil, and Paul Welsh joined. So he was my competitor. And I said, I'm going to kill. And it was a number of things that we did, but one of the best things that we ever did, I've always been a huge believer that the strength of the computer market is mostly down to the independent retailers. Because they're the guys who live and breathe it, the same as everybody in here, you know what I'm saying. They understand it. You go into a Dixon store, they don't even know what the hell you're talking about. They're lucky if they know how to ring up a bloody cash register and put the thing in a bag. But the independent dealers, they are our extended sales force. So what I did was through our distributors, because we didn't have hundreds and thousands of small accounts, we had 5 major distributors. And I put a promotion on the distributors and said, right, every Commodore product is going to have points. I put a special budget in place. And for every machine, no matter what it is, it's got a Commodore or Amiga badge on it, each retailer will earn points. If they reach this number of points, we're going to take them on a really good trip. And the first trip we took them to Mexico City and then Acapulco. And if I tell you that, for example, in Acapulco, we stayed at the Acapulco Princess, which at that time was in the top 5 hotels in the world. So we took 36 dealers on that first trip. And of course, we just laid everything on. You can't imagine, it was incredible. Of course, I had to go ahead a few weeks and make sure everything was right. Terrible job, but somebody had to do it, But anyway, what I'm saying is that as soon as those 36 dealers got back, they told all the other people, you don't know what you've missed. So we put another trip on, and the biggest challenge was finding the next best venue. But we took them all over the world, and we killed them. Anybody went in to an independent dealer and said, I want to buy an ST. No, you don't. You want to buy an Amiga. And I swear to you, so we absolutely killed them. So, and I love that.
Now, we've heard some good stuff about Commodore. I want to hear some bad stuff just before we finish, which will be in just a minute. I know we started late and we've run over a little, but we do need to close it out. And you promised on your Kickstarter some stories of how Commodore was managed from hero to zero. Can you give us a little zinger to finish with?
Sure, pleasure. Well, there's many stories, but I think one that really does sum up the total mismanagement of the company. Now, in the UK, we were very lucky because we managed to keep the Commodore 64 selling for 2 years beyond its real live-by date, by putting great bundles together and everything and making it attractive and up-to-date and trendy and all that stuff. But anyway, our final year of the 64, I went to Medi, I said, right, no more 64, it's dead. It's a waste of time even producing it because we're not going to sell any. So I said, what we need to do, Medi, is that I want to capture the audience who have been buying the Commodore 64. That socio-economic group, we need them. So I said, what I want you to do, I want us to produce a very low-cost Amiga with that, as long as you can upgrade it, as and when you can afford it. So I said, we were selling 64s for 200 quid. I said, we can probably get away with, say, 249 as a price point. So if you can make a low-cost Amiga, which, as cheap as you can make it, but it must be expandable. Then we're going to get those people who would normally buy a 64, they'll get into the Amiga range and grow up from there. Which is, if you think about it, it's a pretty logical thing to do. So the idea was we will launch this product called the A300. And it will be a cut down version of the Amiga 500 and fill that financial gap. So we had a meeting in Germany and everything was agreed. The next thing I know is we get a shitload of A600s. And the A600, first of all, the name A600, immediately you think it's an upgraded version of the 500, which of course it wasn't. It had a lot less things on it than the 500. It cost more to make than the bloody 500. I mean, you could not get a bigger disaster than that. So what it did is it killed immediately all the 500 sales, because everybody thought the A600 was a better model, because of them putting the name A600, which was really stupid. And if that wasn't bad enough, the fact that every one we sold, we made less money than we did with the 500. But if that wasn't bad enough, around that time, they'd run out of standard A500s. They'd got the A500 Plus. So they shipped 500 Pluses in an A500 box, didn't tell anybody. I mean, I'm not being, honestly, I reckon if I'd have hired a team of professional saboteurs, they could not have done a better job than that. It's true. But the worst thing of all is that those first thousands of Amiga 600s that came in, they all had A300 on the motherboard. So I think it's a pretty good example of a management eating its own young.
I'm slightly confused because the A600 had the AGA chipset. It was actually technically better than the A500. Was there 600 not AGA?
No.
Oh, right. I never had it on.
You are.
I'm going to say.
Okay, we are out of time on this one, unfortunately, but please join me in thanking our guests, of course, David Pleasance, Simon Butler, Colin Forch, Anthony Ball, and Archer Maclean.
I think we probably can do some questions if there were.
Can I just have an advert, please? My book's coming out very shortly. You can pre-order it on my website, which is www.downtimepublishing.com. Downtimepublishing.com. You can pre-order it on there. So just spread the word. Thanks.
But yeah, I think that's. Are there any questions from the audience for the gentleman?
Hi all. Yeah, quick one to David. If you have been successful with your takeover of Commodore that you just talked about, how would you have turned things around? Do you think, what sort of things would you have produced?
How long have we got? Well, no.
That's this man.
Yeah. Well, this will take 3 or 4 minutes probably to answer it very briefly. Basically, we were not going to make any products of our own that had CBM or Commodore on them. We would have concentrated on Amiga. But that doesn't mean to say that we would not have used CBM and Commodore. Our plan was to license the names. Okay, CBM at one time was as powerful as IBM. It really was in terms of its name. So what we would have done was we would have offered out to one or more, probably one, PC manufacturer to license our name for and put CBM on their PCs, which we believe would have been very attractive, and maybe just get a couple of % royalty. Now, all we would need to do for that, in terms of financing it, was to make sure that we had a quality control division that made sure that anything that went out with our name on it was up to scratch. However, there's another revenue opportunity, because we would then say to those manufacturers with the CBM name on it, oh, by the way, if you want us to sell your product into our network, because we've got people on the road, we've got all the, we're in every store in Europe and all over the world, we will sell it for you, take orders, and you pay us commission. So we would be earning revenue from that process without ever manufacturing anything ourselves. We would do the same with the name Commodore. With Commodore, we plan to do that from anything with a plug on it. No, seriously, toasters, kettles, it didn't matter what it was, because Commodore was a household name and it was a trusted name. So we could do that, all of those sorts of things, and do exactly the same thing. Small commission for royalties, and then we would sell their products for them. So to sell them, place the orders, we get paid when the shipment gets delivered. It's a no-brainer, and it's a very, very cost-effective way of making a lot of money. In terms of our own products, we had designed a system which was going to give as much longevity to the Amiga range as possible. We had designed a tower case, which the idea was that we, through those independent dealers, that you would be able to take in your 500 and you would be able to put it into a tower case, use the peripherals that you had, or if you wanted to, you could go to a 1200 or a 1000 or a 2000 or whatever you wanted to do. We would make the motherboards available on their own. So we would give a longevity path, which we called Amiga Infinity. And that would have given us, we think, a very long-term, anything we ever manufactured to do with Amiga would be made to fit into that tower case. So it was all designed and ready to go. I think that personally was a really, really clever idea. The other thing we were going to do was CD32s. I wanted to sell to all of the hi-fi manufacturers to put into their stacking systems. Instead of putting a CD or then ultimately a DVD or nowadays Blu-rays, we would have sold them to go, and they'd even manufacture themselves because they could probably manufacture them cheaper than us. But that would achieve two things. First of all, it would bring the cost of the product down. Three things. We would earn revenue from it. But one of the most important things of all, what it would achieve, was getting a computer into the living room. Because obviously you add on a keyboard and whatever else, you end up with a computer in the living room. Now, put it this way, our business plan was so strong that we raised $50 million in 1994, 95. It's hard to raise that today. The other thing we're going to do, of course, is that we had this incredible product under development, which ESCOM and the idiots who bought the things let go. We had this product which is codenamed Ombre, and it was a RISC-based processor as the core, to which we added a 3D rendering engine, we added the blitter, we added a chunky planar mode, we had 5.1 surround sound stereo built into it. This is in 1994, and I'm telling you, there is nothing on the market today that comes anywhere near what I saw that product could do. Obviously it was mocked up with software and everything, but the showing us what it would do, it was phenomenal.
Okay, I think last question.
Yeah, part of what I was interested in, what you already said there, what you would have gone on with, but with the, what you say, the remains of the Amiga market today is so fragmented, and there's so much backstabbing going on between the people who bought out different bits like intellectual property, hardware and all that. Do you think it's ever going to be possible for someone to bring it back as a proper commercial platform?
No.
That's very sad.
I was approached so many times by people with all these different ideas. They were going to fund this, fund that, and the other. None of it actually made any sense, to be perfectly honest with you. And I don't see any point in getting involved in something that you know is not going to work. I think it's too late. I'm a standard at the cult level of the Amiga today and 64. It's astonishing around the world. It's absolutely amazing. Only, I think, because we were the right product at the right time. We spawned a generation of people, many of whom are now in very high-powered jobs in companies all over the world. And they started a lot with 64, but many of them with Amiga, and it just changed their lives forever. I honestly think that moment is gone. I really do. Let's be honest about it. Look at the development of the PCs over the last 5 years. There's hardly anything staggering come through at all. Or am I wrong?
Okay, one more. Does anyone have a burning question they've wanted to ask since they were sort of 10 years old? No? Okay. Well, I'll come back to...
I've got one. It's not actually Amiga related. It's more to do with Imagine. Colin and Simon, who I want to speak to about the actual last days of Imagine. I don't know whether you've seen the Commercial Breaks documentary.
I've seen it.
In your opinion, or what you know, was all that true? Was it all sort of made for television? Was it actually like that in the last days?
To a large extent, it was like that, and we all knew that there was something seriously wrong. because we hadn't been paid,
Yeah.
and we were told we were going to pay it on Monday or Tuesday and Wednesday, and then it would come to the following week, and we still hadn't been paid. And then the bailiffs moved in. I had a particular problem because in that building I had some of my own equipment. I had a computer, a Sage computer, which was mine. Yeah.
Is it actually true that you hid stuff in the toilets and stuff like that?
Not to my knowledge.
No, nobody knew in advance.
No, we didn't know in advance.
I actually didn't work at Ocean at that point. I knew everybody that did. I used to go and visit on a daily basis. What you see from Granada TV, it's not set up at all.
Yeah.
Right? That's like one of the most serendipitous moments. Yeah, I mean, Granada went to make a documentary, about Imagine. So they were doing the whole thing, Lawson, Butler, Everest, and the Mega Games, and Ian and John, etc. Yeah, all of that. And while they were doing that, on one particular day, the bailiffs arrived. And that was it. And see, the thing is, that ties in with Ocean as well, because David and John from Ocean, they were both Scousers, you see. And every single business that they'd had outside of... David had had a roller disco in the States, and apparently some Italian family asked him to leave. So every business that David and John had been based in Liverpool. And they chose not to base Ocean in Liverpool because Imagine were there. And Imagine were making such a big stink, well, not stink, but Imagine were doing everything to make sure that they were in the papers almost every day. Local papers, national papers. Look at us, we're paying our staff ridiculous salaries, 17 years of age, they're all driving sports cars.
You should have seen the building they were in, called Tideburn House.
Indeed. I mean, they moved from one building to another, within a year. It was ridiculous. They were just buffoons. They deserved their demise. They really, really did. They got what was coming to them.
It kind of evolved into something else.
Very, very briefly. Before they were Ocean, they were something else before Ocean, weren't they? Yeah, but they got out because of Lawson and Butler. No relation, by the way.
If it all didn't happen, though, we wouldn't have had Signosis, which is basically the byproduct of all that. And they made some really good games, so, which were all Commodore machine based.
I didn't like Signosis. I mean, Signosis for me were the start of the CGI intro, and the cut scenes. Oh, Jesus, they put more effort into all these cut scenes and these intros than they did in the games. I thought the games were absolutely shocking, almost without exception.
I don't know, the hardware that they used was good. They used the Amiga hardware.
I'm not a tech, so I don't give a toss about the hardware. For me, it's gameplay. I don't care what the machine's doing in there. The machine can be doing miracles and parting the seas and stuff like that.
No, because sometimes the hardware trick is the origin of the game. Because we wouldn't have had Ball Blazer from the Atari without the hardware being able to do the trick, and it's the trick that leads on to the game.
Yeah, but Signosis were never known for gameplay, for having absolutely mustard. I mean, look, they have possibly one of the most famous graphical demos in the world, Shadow of the Beast.
Anyway, we could argue for hours and we are out of time. Somebody dropped a little Easter egg in there. Remember the name Bandersnatch? It will come back.
Yeah, so.
And I can't say why, but you will come to figure it out. So yes, once again, please join me in thanking our guests: David Pleasance, Simon Butler, Colin Forch, Anthony Ball, and Archer Maclean. Thank you.
Right, there you go.